And we're joined now by Ohio Republican Congressman Mike Turner. Good morning. Good to have you here in person.
Thanks for having me.
I want to talk to you about Ukraine, which you just returned from. But before I do that, let's button up where we left the conversation with Senator Klobuchar. FBI Director Chris Wray was twice spoken about in public statements by the president yesterday, and he said he has some explaining to do. He seemed to be connecting it to the FBI and January 6th. Are you at all concerned by the former director's actions?
Well, I do think with this new information, there's going to have to be some explaining as to what is this new information and how does this relate to January 6th?
Specifically the number of the agents, that 274?
Yes, this does seem to be significantly different than what anyone has heard before. And how does this relate to the circumstances of what occurred there? Certainly, Kash Patel, as he's bringing this forward, this is going to be information that I think does relate. It really does go to everyone's confidence of what we currently know about that day. There's been a number of investigations and a number of people who've looked at this. Yeah. This certainly is concerning, and I think it is
but what
better.
Part is concerning? Because that Inspector General report said months ago that there were several hundred FBI agents who responded after the Capitol Police asked them to be there.
But it's the issue of what was their role? What did they do? That aspect, I think, certainly, as we look at this information, as the FBI looks at the information, is it the same? Is it the same information that has been looked at before, or is it different? And that certainly bears a review, and that, I think, will occur.
So when the president says Chris Wray has some explaining to do, how do you interpret that? Because the Inspector General report is public. Kash Patel said those individuals were there. It's not standard to send them, but it was disclosed they were there after
As the information comes forward, obviously, the current FBI director and the FBI is going to have to come forward with the information. That information will be reviewed, and then ultimately, the FBI is going to have to, and I think that the prior director will have to explain how this information relates to what we've looked at before. And it's either going to be the same and prove that it is as everyone believed the circumstances were before, or it's going to be different. And at that point, we're going to have to look at how does it relate to what we believe we knew, and how does it relate to what we now see? But we don't know, because I have no information. I think no one else has any additional information besides what the news reports are. And we'll have to review what that information is.
But just to be very clear, because it is such a dangerous information environment in so many ways, you are not in any way suggesting that the FBI was secretly agitating, which is what the president said, the attack on January 6th.
I'm not suggesting anything, and I don't think you are either. I think what we're both suggesting is that this currently is in news reports, and those news reports certainly bear a review of the information that's going to come forward, and that information is either going to tell us that it's the same information that has been seen before, or it's going to be new information, and if it's new information, that's going to need to be reviewed.
We're going to take a break, and I want to talk about your trip to Ukraine and the other side of it, but I have to do this right now, so stay with us, all of you. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We return now to our conversation with Ohio Republican Congressman Mike Turner. Congressman, we were showing video there earlier of the overnight attack Russia carried out against Ukraine. You were just there in Kyiv. I'm sure you welcomed what the president said this week when he said he now has changed his mind and he does believe Ukraine could win this war and get its territory back from Russia. But he also added he wishes everyone well when he made that statement. So is he telling us that the United States is walking away from Ukraine and leaving it up to them? Or is he signaling that the United States is going to help Ukraine win that territory back?
Well, we definitely need help, and this is part of the dirty secret that where the United States really needs to step it up, and it's part of the meeting that he had with the president of the EU Commission. The United States is providing aid to Ukraine, but at the same time, the West, the EU, and the United States is subsidizing Russia and its production machine because we're buying from China and India that is buying energy from Russia, and the EU is buying energy from Russia. So we need to place sanctions on Russia so that we're not funding their economy, which is funding their ability to attack and kill Ukraine. So we're funding both sides of this. Unfortunately, there are those in Congress that want to stop supporting Ukraine's ability to defend themselves. Well, that'll just result in more attacks from Russia, as we saw last night against Ukraine. That's not going to get us to peace. The only way to get us to peace, and Trump's vision of peace, is to impact their ability for production, to stop subsidizing Russia's economy and their ability for production and killing Ukrainians. And that's to adopt Lindsey Graham and Brian Fitzpatrick's bill that would impose sanctions, give the president the ability to impact Russia's ability to wage this war and get us to peace.
But Speaker Johnson has said before that he would put that bill to a vote. He just hasn't. And he said, oh, I need the president to greenlight it. That's not true. He has a veto-proof majority. We've had Senator Graham on this program a million times telling us this is set to go. Just give us the green light. Did Speaker Johnson respond to your request to move?
No, and the momentum is here. We need to do this now. The president doesn't need to give us a green light. He's not a red light.
Well, the last time
we're coming back, and we need to do so. We need to do so now. The last time we put on the floor the bill that would have stopped funding Ukraine, over 300 members voted for it. If we put the bill on the floor to put sanctions on Russia, stop funding their economy, it would be similar. Over 300 members would vote for it. The only way to peace is to put sanctions on Russia, continuing our support for Ukraine, which is what we're doing, what the president's going to be doing, and bring this war to an end. Support Trump's vision of peace, put sanctions on Russia, stop funding their war economy. Now, what I saw in Ukraine, which is what's really incredible, is that they are winning modern warfare. What they're doing with their anti-drone technology, I mean, they are really the tech bros of the future. They are implementing on the front line anti-drone air defense technology that is winning this war. With our help and assistance, which they're going to continue to need for the long-range systems that Russia's bringing in and that are attacking Kyiv with. But what their anti-drone technology that no one else has, that they are implementing, they are winning this war. We need to be on the side of that war of the future that they're winning and support Ukraine.
And I've heard military officials explain this to me, that this is like a really interesting test case to learn the lessons that Ukraine is illustrating for the world. However, in the immediate term, will the president lift restrictions on Ukraine's ability to use long-range weapons to actually attack Russia?
Well, and he really needs to do so, because what's happening with that pressure that's on the front line.
Because he has the old Biden policy.
Right, well, he does, and that's what he needs to release, because with the pressure on the front line and the fact that Ukraine has developed anti-drone technology where they're taking down Russian drones, they're using their own drones to attack Russia, but Russia has long-range weapons that they're attacking that front line. Ukraine needs to have the ability to use long-range weapons to push Russia back. And when they're able to do that, they will get their territory back. If they are able to do that, they will win this war. And if we put sanctions on Russia impacting their ability to produce their war machine and production, they will be able to win this modern warfare, and we'll be on the right side of what this is. Not old-time war. This is modern war, and we're on the right side of Ukraine.
You've just got to persuade President Trump to do that change in policy. When we were in France last week speaking to President Macron, I asked him about those incursions into European airspace. Some would say by Russian drones or Russian jets. Others have said they still need to investigate. We've seen drones or jets into Poland, Estonia, Romania, Norway, possibly Denmark. What should the United States be doing to push back on those provocations? You
know, what's interesting about this is that what we've always said is that, Russia, once they got through Ukraine, would be testing and can continue into Europe. But what they're seeing now, because they're having this success of Ukraine, they're going over Ukraine. They're now going into Poland and Romania, and they're seeing that Poland and Romania don't have the advanced technology that Ukraine does. And instead of going through Ukraine, they're going over Ukraine. Since this is modern warfare and Ukraine's winning it, they're seeing that the old war is actually old Europe.
Mike Turner, thank you for sharing some of your insights, what you learned on the ground in Ukraine.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back in a moment, so stay with us. We turn now to Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine, who joins us this morning from Richmond. Good morning to you, Senator.
Morning, Margaret.
You have, 140,000 federal civilian workers in your state, one of the highest numbers in the nation. How concerned are you that you will see mass layoffs if we go into this shutdown that the White House says they are preparing for?
Well, and I think your reporter, Robert Acosta, said they're even welcoming it. We are really worried about it, Margaret. When Ted Cruz forced a shutdown of the government in October 2013, it hurt Virginia pretty bad. And when Donald Trump forced a shutdown of the government in late 2018, early 2019, it hurt Virginia pretty bad. And this one would be the same. The only thing about the president's threat to fire more people is he's already doing it. And instead of threatening, he should just be meeting to negotiate. We came near shutdown deadlines during the Biden administration, but we never shut government down because the president would sit down with congressional leaders of both parties and would find a path forward. And that's what we've been asking for since the Democrats put an alternate plan on the table on September 18th. Just sit down and talk with us. And finally, he has agreed to do that tomorrow. But if your reporting is to be believed, he's sort of going into it reducing expectations improperly. He should be doing what presidents do and saying we're going to find a deal to keep the government of the greatest nation on earth open.
But is it enough of a deal to say take the short-term 7-week funding deal and we'll continue to talk about these health care subsidies that Democrats say they are so concerned about? I mean, is it really worth the risk?
Here's my thought about this, Margaret, my personal view. We've got to solve this health care issue, and Republicans are saying the same thing. Mike Johnson has said it. Senator Cornyn has said it. Senator Hawley has said it. Senator Murkowski has said it. We're asking to fix a problem that even Republicans want to fix. I don't think we have to have every detail pinned down with all the I's dotted and T's crossed in order to do a short-term extension. But I do want to see that Republicans are saying, you're right, we can fix this, and here's the path to finding a fix. And the second thing we need, which is so reasonable, we're just asking, if we do a deal, please don't, Mr. President, sign the deal and then immediately the next day starting to take away funds, rescinding agreements that you just made yesterday. A deal should be a deal, and we should all agree that Americans should not see their health care suffer, their premiums spike, and people lose insurance and providers close. We've already had providers in Virginia announce that they are closing their doors because of the bill that the Republicans passed in July. And this is happening all over the country. Let's just do what's right by our constituents and fix it.
I want to ask you another question specific to Virginia, and that is what is going on inside the judicial system. Back in August, it was the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia, Todd Gilbert, who suddenly resigned. Then, earlier this month, the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, resigned after failing to bring a case against New York's Attorney General Letitia James. What is going on here in the Virginia court system?
Margaret, it's pretty darn plain. The president nominated 2 U.S. attorneys in Virginia, both with Republican bona fides. Todd Gilbert in the Western District had been the Republican Speaker of our House of Delegates. He resigned as a legislator to take the Trump appointment. President Trump's team interviewed these candidates, approved the candidates, nominated the candidates, and then even appointed them into the interim position. But both were forced out because they said their integrity as prosecutors would not allow them to genuflect to Donald Trump. And in Todd Gilbert's case, they wanted to force him to demote a longtime career member of the Western District of Virginia who had served under multiple administrations and presidents. He refused to do so. And in Eric Siebert's case, he refused to bring a criminal charge against a perceived Trump political opponent when there was no evidence to support the charge. President Trump spending time going after enemies, trying to figure out a way to give $20 billion to a friend, the Argentine government, instead of dealing with the challenges we elected him to confront. Food prices are going up. Building supplies are going up, school supplies are going up, energy costs are going up, healthcare costs are going up, and Donald Trump seems to be focused on a retribution campaign. You got to focus, man. This is an important job. It's time to focus.
Well, when it comes to those Virginia cases, have you talked to Siebert? Have you talked to Gilbert to understand why they felt they had to resign?
I have talked to each of them after the resignations were done. These were individuals I knew both. I knew Todd Gilbert because of his legislative role, and I knew Eric Siebert very well by reputation. And again, this was the prosecutor, Margaret, who, when the Biden administration transitioned to the Trump administration DOJ put him in the role as an interim even before we recommended him, along with our Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, as you mentioned. So after they had been fired, yes, I did call and say, I'd like to understand why you were forced out. And they shared thoughts with me without getting into anything about particular cases or particular communication they'd had with Trump administration officials. But I am convinced, and Virginians are convinced. I traveled around the state this week. People are talking about this.
Yeah.
Both of these individuals had a backbone. They wouldn't genuflect to Donald Trump, and they wouldn't bring baseless cases. And we shouldn't see that in any district in this nation. And it's sad that President Trump is more focused on retribution than serving his constituents.
Well, that Eastern District did come forward with this indictment of former FBI Director James Comey. Yes, it was just a 2-page indictment, no evidence presented publicly here, but it was convincing enough to 14 of 23 people sitting on a grand jury. Can you really say there's no there?
Well, a bare majority. As you know, Margaret, there's 23 people on a grand jury. They need at least 12 votes to get an indictment. And yes, they got their finger over the bar with 14, although the 23 wouldn't agree on one of the charges that the U.S. attorney was pushing. So we will see what this case is about. It is odd that the indictment has so few facts, and I found it very odd. I used to practice in this court, and when the Attorney General put out a press statement after the indictment and said, we will follow the facts in this case, what? Prosecutors follow the facts before they indict. They don't indict and then say, well, let's see what the facts are. I think she even revealed that this is a weak case, which everyone in her office was telling her it was a weak case.
You, on your armed services role, I want to quickly ask you, you have said you are supportive of the creation of a Palestinian state. And we saw at the UN this past week, a large number of members just simply walked out when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke. It was a statement. Tomorrow, he's going to be at the White House. Ahead of that meeting, President Trump said this.
I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank. There's been enough. It's time to stop now, okay?
That's a strong statement. Do you know how the United States should enforce that? How do you force Israel to step back from annexation?
Well, I was very heartened that the president said that. And you're right. I support what the United States voted for in the UN in 1947, a state of Israel and a state of Palestine. One of those promises has been met, one hasn't. And we need to be on a path for a Palestinian state that's demilitarized, where Hamas plays no role in its governance. And until we find that path forward, we're going to have continued cycles of violence that are bad for Israelis, bad for Palestinians, bad for the region. So I hope the president, who by all accounts has a strong relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu, makes plain that we are against annexation. And this 21-point proposal that the president has on the table, which is pretty similar to the New York dialogue being led by the French and the Saudis. They're different efforts, but they're trying to reach the same point: a future state for Israel and Palestine where both can live in peace, and creating stability in the region instead of the cycles of violence. So I hope the president leans into that at the meeting tomorrow. I was heartened by his comment. It would be a big mistake for the Prime Minister Netanyahu to look at all of these nations that have been allies saying, you need to change course, and for him to just pull his head in the shell and turn inward and continue to isolate Israel rather than move forward toward peace and more stability in the region.
Senator Kaine, thank you for your insights today. We'll be back in a moment. And we're joined now by Cobb. He served as White House special counsel for just under a year during the first Trump administration, helping to coordinate the response to Robert Mueller's probe of Russian influence on the 2016 election. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margaret. Thanks for having me.
Well, we saw this action against former FBI Director James Comey this past week, and he was indicted on 2 charges specific to his September 2020 testimony to Congress about Russian election meddling in 2016, so-called Crossfire Hurricane. In your view, from what you've heard of this case, do you think it has enough substance to actually head to trial?
I don't really. You know, as you and Senator Kaine discussed briefly moments ago, that the grand jury rejected one of the counts, the top count actually in the indictment, approved two, but by a very slim margin, 14 out of 23. In a process where there's no defense attorney in the room and the standard is merely probable cause. You know, the next courtroom that this will be assessed in, if it gets to trial, requires unanimity from 12 people, and there will be a vigorous defense. I don't see any way in the world that, you know, Comey will be convicted. And I think there's a good chance because of, you know, the wholly unconstitutional, authoritarian way that this was done, that the case may get tossed out well before trial.
Wholly unconstitutional and authoritarian. That's quite a description. You used to work for President Trump. What makes you now characterize his actions that way?
I used to work. Well, I used to work at the White House as a lawyer, you know, interacting with the Justice Department in the Mueller investigation and other matters. And I was not Trump's personal lawyer, so. Right. My role was really, you know, as a government employee, and not personal to the president. He did have personal lawyers, but you know, at the time, you know, I was trying to perform the duties that were assigned to me. In this circumstance, you know, I'm 8 years removed from that. Mm-hmm. I don't have any allegiances or reasons to, you know, say anything other than balls and strikes. And, you know, former Attorney General Jackson, Justice Jackson, Nuremberg prosecutor himself, highlighted in 1940 that the most important thing at the Justice Department when he was Attorney General was that people not target individuals, mm-hmm. that they merely pursue crimes. Griffin Bell, you know, years later, 1978, you know, said essentially the same thing, emphasized how, you know, politics and, you know, favor have no business at the Justice Department. Yeah. It's all about even-handedness. And I think we talked about the misrepresentations that Attorney General Bondi made about how she would proceed even-handedly, and, you know, she's wholly abandoned that. And is now merely doing the president's bidding when he says, prosecute my enemies, now.
Yeah, well, the New York Times is reporting that half a dozen U.S. attorneys' offices have been ordered to draft plans to investigate a group funded by George Soros, who is a Democratic donor. You look at that, you look at the lists of names of others who the president has said he specifically wants to be prosecuted or investigated. I'll read a few of them to you. Two former Trump officials, Chris Krebs and Miles Taylor. He also said he wants a federal investigation into former special counsel Jack Smith. The DOJ fired the 35 lawyers who were involved in the January 6th and classified documents cases. Justice Department's now going after Fulton County DA Fani Willis's travel records. We have quite an exhaustive list here. What is the pattern you see?
Well, I think if you go to 30,000 feet, what you see is a lot of moving parts, but simple themes. The simple themes are rewriting history. Trump wants to rewrite history so that you know, the next generation may not know that he incited a violent insurrection, refused to peacefully transfer the power of the presidency after losing an election, stole classified documents and showed them to, you know, friends and guests at Mar-a-Lago, you know, and that he was a criminal. I mean, he's a convicted felon. Anybody involved in those events that offended him, they're in real danger. So you have the rewriting history stuff. You know, the mm-hmm. U.S. attorney that he appointed as personal lawyer, Lindsay Halligan. You know, her role previously in the administration was, you know, trying to eliminate the theory that, you know, America, you know, had slaves at the Smithsonian. She was there to, you know, whitewash the Smithsonian. Yeah. And paint America as something that it isn't. I mean, America needs to learn from the mistakes and lessons that we've had. And one of the biggest mistakes that America ever had was re-electing President Trump.
Well, a number of Republican lawmakers are declining to speak out and are leaving the door open that these cases are legitimate. Do you think that the judicial system can resist what you are saying here as just simply politically motivated pressure?
I think that's an excellent question. I think, you know, the founders, when they drafted the Constitution, Article 1 is to Congress, and Congress has the greatest powers under the Constitution: spending power, war power, impeachment. Congress is really there to check the presidency.
Yeah.
Congress has been neutered by the cowardice of the Republicans. Mike Johnson won't even seat recently elected Representative Gravalja because he doesn't want her to tip the balance on the Epstein vote. So Congress is totally in the tank, and the judiciary is doing its best.
Sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry, because we're out of time there. Ty Cobb, thank you for your time. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.